Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of Pirkei, Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. It's always a joy to be with him. No one makes me laugh as much as he does. It makes my day, but also hearing the Torah and hearing the ethics of the fathers. You can't go wrong with ethics, folks. I can't stress that enough. Let's just tune right in and see how the rabbi's doing. Rabbi Coffman, good day to you, sir. Oops, I'll take that back. Good day to you, Rabbi. You're live on the air.
Always a pleasure. One day we're going to switch. I'm going to do the intro and then you'll speak.
We'll see how that goes.
Always a pleasure. We're still holding by the second Mishnah and the second chapter. We spoke a few weeks back, basically about Torah and work, right? Maybe they don't necessarily go hand in hand, or maybe they do, etc. Because we said, as the Mishnah says, all Torah study not joined with work will cease to end, and it will lead. It'll lead to sin. Right. So we mentioned actually, before we go further, we mentioned that a person can be successful in business, and he has to realize the success does not come from himself. Right. This is something for a lot of people that's difficult to understand, because they want to invoke what it says in the book of Deuteronomy. What it says in the book of Deuteronomy. I did it by the work of my hands. Right. I worked hard. I brought in the money. Right. So the harder I work, or maybe the less harder I work, whatever, I get something good I want to sell, people buy it. I make a lot of money. But isn't it true at the end of the day, doesn't really matter what I do. Doesn't matter about IQ. Right. It matters if God blesses it or not. Right. Because we said if I would invent, or we already know someone invented those small those toothpick umbrellas. Right. They put them in these, hard liquor drinks. Guy made a mint, right? Someone invented the pet rock, right? You remember the pet rock? You don't have to feed it. You don't have to walk it. Guy made millions. Now, someone else could have invented that, right? Someone else could have invented that, made nothing, right? So we think that, everything I do, right, affects how successful I'm going to be. Now, obviously, we have to put our best foot forward. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be successful. So some people will say, I need both. I need to learn Torah, and I need to work. But what if, we mentioned, what if a person's wife is willing to support? So the person can sit and learn all day, right? So you can say, what about that? But if he's learning for the sake of heaven, right, which we spoke about, so that's a whole different thing. If he's doing it just because, that's what society tells him to do, or here in Israel, he's trying to duck the army, right? Doesn't want to do the army, or whatever the case is. Okay, that's wrong, right? But it doesn't mean if a person's learning for the sake of heaven, and he's learning day and night, and his wife is willing to help support and all that, so why is that a bad thing, right? So we mentioned about, let's say the modern Orthodox community, and others will say, come on, there's a mitzvah to learn secular things, right? We sort of butchered that as well. So there's another explanation. Hillel says, right? We know we're going to see by Hillel that Hillel says, if I'm here, everything's here, and if I'm not here, nobody's here. Right? They're going to say, wow, Hillel was considered a tremendous honor, considered someone who's unbelievably humble. If he's unbelievably humble, what is he saying? He's like, if I'm here, everybody's here, right? Or if I'm not here, who's here, right? So commentaries say over here that we learn out, what are we talking about, right? We're talking about someone who helps the community. Now remember, the Mishnah says you work for the community for the purpose of helping the community, right? Not for the power to brag, right? Certainly not to say, I did this and I did that, for the sake of the community, because the Mishnah says all who exert themselves for the community, they should exert themselves for the sake of heaven, for the merit of the community's forefathers, that we're going to speak about. They're going to aid in their righteousness for the merit of the community, which doesn't make so much sense, because if I'm working hard for the community, what does that have to do with the forefathers? of the community. In other words, if I'm trying to help, why do I need the merit of the forefathers? That we're going to see. And nevertheless, even if you do it, God's going to say, even if it was for the sake of the forefathers of the community, you get credit. And you're going to get reward as if you did it yourself. So that is a mind-boggling idea, because really, you put your best foot forward. Putting your best foot forward, God could say yay or nay, right? It could go either way. But where's the merit coming from? It has nothing to do with you. Where does the merit come from? It comes from the forefathers. If it comes from the forefathers, then why should I get credit?
Right.
Why in the world should I get credit?
Right.
And the reality is I shouldn't get credit. But what happens? You get rewarded if you did it by yourself.
Oof.
Now, the obvious question is, what in the world does that mean? What does that mean exactly? And that we're gonna have to see. Because if I put my best foot forward, why shouldn't I get credit on my own merit? Right? And the reality is we really don't have our own merit. We're going to see by the Shemona Esrei, the silent meditation, whatever you want to call it, there are 19 blessings. Right? It's the main part of every prayer service for Jews. Right? Because you just mentioned non-Jews don't have a prayer service. Right? They'll question what they're allowed to say, what they're not allowed to see. All these little conversations we have, it ends up coming up. Right? I'm not going to, don't worry, I won't expose you in other things. We'll keep it clean over here. But in general, by the Shemona Esrei, right, by the silent meditation, what do we say? We say, Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoseinu, the God of our forefathers, Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. In other words, what do we do before we ask for any of our needs? Knowledge, health, parnasa, livelihood, any of these things, spiritual redemption, physical redemption, right? Whatever it is, first thing we do is show our credentials. What are our credentials? We don't have our own, right? We're stepping on the coattails of the greats, right? Of the great of the greats. We say Avram, Yitzhak, Yaakov. Those are our credentials. We don't come and say in my own credentials. Right. Why not? We don't have credentials, right? We're on a much, much lower level. So before we ask God for any of our needs, we have to butter him up, and we have to say, listen, I'm not coming on my own. If I was coming on my own, God's going to say next, right? Next person's going to say next. He's going to push away. He's going to push away all the prayers because we don't have our own merit. Our merit comes from the sake of our forefathers, right? So that we may be able to understand, a little bit. So let's start at the beginning. If you exert yourself for the sake of heaven, right, for the merit of the community's forefathers, etc., right? In other words, you're not allowed, if a person's working for the community, I have no ulterior motives. I'm not doing it that, people pat me on the back. I'm not doing it so, they'll name one of their kids after me. I'm not doing it so they put, my name on a plaque or any of these things. I'm doing it for the sake of the community. I'm not doing it for anything, for myself. And if I'm successful, I don't take credit for myself, right? There are a lot of things that go on in order to make a person successful. It's not necessarily based on what you do. There could be many other factors. God says, okay, I'm going to bless him over here. I'm going to help him over here. Other times, maybe he won't. Maybe it'll be more difficult. Depends on what, where, how, when. Depends on a lot of different things, right? But in the end, a person's going to have some merit somewhere that God's either going to want to help him, or God forbid, not that way. Now, there's an interesting thing. There's an interesting thing that, what happens, let's say, a person does not do exactly what God says, right? It doesn't go according to what the Torah says, according to what the mitzvahs say, etc. But what happens? God helps them anyway, right? So I've gotten this question a number of times.
Right. No, it's big.
Actually, I thought I was really going to cover it in my Q&A, but now I see it really comes up over here. So I guess I'll deal with it now. Maybe I'll deal with it in my Q&A as well, but we'll deal with it now. And that is, let's say somebody does not do what God wants, right? Someone, will make it easy. He spits in God's face. Someone is evil, right? They don't, or let's say they keep certain things in the Torah, but other things they don't do. They want to do it, what they say, my way or the highway. right? I'm going to do it my way. God's going to speak to me. God's going to tell me. I'm going to this. I don't have to listen to rabbis. Checkmate, all these things. Big deal, right? So someone's going to say, but I got my prayers answered. God always, answers my prayers, right? So someone asked if that's the case. Now my answer was, well, if you're a Christian or a Muslim, God could just be leading you down the wrong path, right? In other words, God could say, oh yeah, I want to, you want this, fine, I'll give it to you. And you're still going to believe in JC. You're going to still believe in the short little fat guy, right? Mr. Buddha himself said, oh, look, Mr. Buddha Fatso answered me, right? So what's that person going to do? They're going to stay strong in their beliefs. And if they're going to stay strong in their beliefs, and if it's idolatry, God's going to wipe them out, right? So one of my answers was, okay, so God wants to wipe you out. You're going down that path, not this person. But let's say someone's going down that path. They get their prayers answered. So what does God do? Keeps them on that path. He's going to wipe them out because they're not interested in truth. If they're interested in truth, that's something different. But if they're not interested in truth, so God gives them more of it, more of what they want, only because he's going to wipe them off the face of the map in the next world.
Wow.
Now, take somebody who's a heretic. Someone, even if they don't know anything in Judaism, we'll still consider them a heretic. They may forfeit their portion of the world to come. What if evil people, they spit in God's face on a regular basis? God makes them wealthy, right? God gives them everything. God gives them everything. Where's the punishment? Where's the reward and punishment over here? Right? So simple explanation is God could be giving, God has to give reward for something that we do in this world. Meaning, not necessarily in this world, but if someone's totally evil and he wants to wipe them out of the face of the map in the next world, what does God do? He has to reward him for any mitzvah he's done in this world. Let's say he helped Granny cross the street. Let's say, mafioso was, he's nice to his mother, but he was an assassin, whatever. Okay, so God has to give him whatever mitzvah that he did. He has to give him merit for it. Otherwise, wouldn't be fair. But he's going to cut him off in the next world, right? So if we see, people that spit in God's face, they don't do what he says, but they seem to have it early, don't worry. God's going to take care of them in this world at some point, and God will take care of them later. Now, so someone's going to come along and say, even though I don't do what you do, right? This is sort of the language that was used. I may not do what you do, right? Now listen to the question. I may not do what you do, but God has always been with me along the path. God is always there, right? So the question was, that's why I get all the easy questions. Question was, so what do you have to say to that? So there are a lot of different answers, a lot of potentially different answers. First of all, you may think God is answering you. Maybe he's in, but maybe he's answering you for one very simple reason, to keep you on this narrow path that you're never going to come close to, right? In other words, he wants you to slide off this path. He wants you to think, oh, I don't have to do very much. I don't have to be like you. I can pick and choose. I don't have to listen to the rabbis. I don't have to listen to oral law. Checkmate. Well, I'll mention that again. I don't have to do any of these things. And if I don't do anything, see, God rewards me. Yeah, but that is deceiving, right? The question. So I'm not playing God over here. I don't have my George Burns mustache and my funny glasses, right? But I'm not playing God over here. I don't think God would be too happy. Probably the network's not either. But if that's the case, who's to say I'm doing minimally what I need to do and God's rewarding me for that? Now, that doesn't make sense. Why? Because there's reward and punishment, right? There are repercussions for what I do. If there are repercussions for what I do, then you want to think you're doing minimal, you're not holding by most of the mitzvahs, and God's answering you like you kept all the mitzvahs? I don't think so.
No.
That's not written in my book.
No.
Right? Now, why? Now, so the question is, that's why I get paid the big bucks here. The question is, why would God do that? Right? Why would God give, let's say a person prays for this, boom, it happens. Prays something else, it happens. Not immediately, maybe sometime after. Why should that be? Right? So one possible explanation could be that God's going to say, all right, you don't have to do very much. I'll give you what you want because I'm going to spit you out in the next world. In other words, it's deceiving because, first of all, we don't see a person getting punished, straight away. And the reason is because otherwise they would have no free will, right? Because every time someone did something wrong, if they would get zapped, right? It's a deterrent. You wouldn't transgress. So that would take our free will away. So over here, a person can be deceived, right? Just like, and this is a whole nother thing which we're not going to get into. Isaac was deceived. He was deceived by Esau, right? But it's hard to say. He didn't know who Esau was. He didn't know what he was doing, right? One reason that Yaakov has to dress up and quote unquote steal the blessing is even to show as righteous as Isaac is, as Yitzchak is, that someone like that could be fooled. Rivka wasn't fooled, right? She understood. She had prophecy. I mean, Isaac was also a prophet, but she has this prophecy, and she knows, right? She knows exactly who Esau is. So that's a whole separate, that's a whole separate thing. But the idea is, or one idea is the fact that a person could be deceived. Just because God answers what you want, to answer up your desires or whatever the case is, that does not necessarily mean by any stretch you're doing what God wants. That's not what it shows. Now, it could be you did a certain mitzvah and God's going to reward you for that, right? So he's going to answer these different things in order to give you that reward. Does that mean he's happy with what you're doing? It's deception. Right, 100%. It's gonna be deception, because how can it be? As someone said, "Wow, I'm not doing as much as you do, but look what God's doing." But that can't be the case. It can't be the case if you understand how reward and punishment works. Right. In other words, I'm not allowed to pick and choose. Right. I have an obligation to keep the Torah as it is. There's an obligation. Now people won't like this, but too bad. Mentioned this many times. There's a mitzvah to listen to the rabbi, right? There's a mitzvah to listen to the Kohen, to the Levite, to the book of Deuteronomy, right? And that means you listen to the rabbis, whatever they tell you, right? So you have to understand how oral law works, right? We're not going down that path either. Watch my videos on Tanakh, talk about oral law, but God is not going to reward someone if they spit in his face for no reason, right? In other words, if you go against what he says, why should he reward you? Now, he's either going to reward you because he's going to knock you off in the next world, and the reward is going to be for certain things, certain mitzvahs that you did in this world, because God has to be fair, right? He has to reward the mitzvah that you've done. So if he's going to spit you out in the next world, you can say, look, God answered all my prayers. And what happens when you die? What happens when you die is like what happens to a dog. Poof, in my language. Dog only has an animalistic soul. If a dog has an animalistic soul, that's it. Nothing happens. So you're going to say, but I have a different type of soul. You're right. Yeah, but that means that soul's going to get cut off. So again, I'm not saying necessarily in this case, this is the fact, right? This is exactly what's going on, right? But I would be led to say the fact that someone gets their prayers answered and they're not doing the right thing in God's eyes, right, on a regular basis, and they're not holding by oral law, they're not listening to the rabbis, so they're not doing very much. How in the world can someone say, well, why, God gave me what I wanted, right? In other words, a person can be a Christian, a Muslim, who knows what, and also get their prayers answered.
Right.
Right? That doesn't mean in any way, shape, or form what they're doing is good in God's eyes. Right. There's no proof for that. Definitely no proof for that.
Huge point.
There's more proof to say that maybe you did a few good things along the way, right? Everyone does something good, hopefully, once in their life or more. God has to reward them. So what does God do? God gives them the merit in this world. He gives them the reward because that's only fair, right? He would give them reward in this world. What happens in the next world? Zero. Nada. FS, right? I was speaking a few different languages there. He gets nothing. He gets absolutely zero. So now, someone wants to come and say, well, God answered my prayers. Okay, maybe he did. But if you're not doing what God wants, there's something else going on. Why would he answer your prayers if you're a heretic? I'm not saying, person's a heretic per se. But if you're not doing what you're supposed to do on a regular basis, there has to be something else going on, right? And again, this person says, well, God is with me all the way along. Maybe he is. Why? Why is that? If you're going to tell me, well, there are people that, people suffer tremendously, health-wise, livelihood-wise, etc. If someone's smelling like roses all the time, every number they pick up is gold, right? Every stock
the
they
Midas
pick,
touch,
goes up. All these things, and nothing bad happens to them, and you're on an unbelievable streak. There's something else going on, right? Because we all have trials. We all have trials and tribulations. Everybody has them. But if someone has it easy across the board, I mean, nobody really has it 100% easy. All kinds of problems people go through, right? But if someone seemingly has it easy, even if they work very hard for their livelihood and and all these different things, they're going to say, look, I've done this and I worked hard, and this other person's struggling and they're sick and they pray all day, quote unquote, and and they're so pious and they're so righteous, and look what happens to them, look what happens to me. Right? So that's the classic case of tzaddik v'ralo, right? When bad things happen to good people. Or rasha v'tovo, someone who's evil and good things happen to him. There's nothing in between. In other words, if God thinks the person's righteous, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make him rich, right? It's going to make life easy for him, right? The Talmud says that a person does not inherit both worlds. What does that mean? It means he's not going to have wealth and Torah. He's not going to be a big rabbinic scholar and have wealth at the same time. Very rare. So I remember when I had all my money stolen from me many years ago. So my Rabbi mentioned this. And he says, listen, not everyone is supposed to merit both worlds. So I said, are you trying to comfort me or make fun of me? Are they trying to make me feel bad? And so I told him when I came back to Israel, I said, listen, if I'm not going to have the blessing, of livelihood, I said, I want the blessing of Torah. I said, okay, I'll take the blessing of Torah, over livelihood any day of the week. Now, it doesn't mean you have to preach poverty over here. We're not saying that, right? But in general, it's very true. The idea that if a person has money, even if he uses it for the right thing, very few people who have money make it into the next world. Mm. Why? Because they don't want to give charity, or they don't want to give as much, and people are bothering them. You'll say, get a better job, work harder. Why don't you make real money? Be a property manager. Get a real job, right? People said that to me over the years. No offense, anyone is a property manager. I had no one in mind. I have to ask forgiveness for that one. No, but the idea is that people will say, well, I worked hard. I made this money, so you could do the same thing, but it doesn't necessarily go, right? In other words, someone to really be humble, to truly have humility, it does not go hand in hand. Their bank account's going to be, it just doesn't, because, the less money a person has in the bank, and I'm not advocating this on anyone, but the less money a person has in their bank account, the more they're going to pray to God. The more they're going to say, listen, you got to help me. You're the only one. I got this bill I got to pay next week. You're the only one who's going to help me over here. If a person's got a fat bank account, they think they're God's gift to the world because, okay, I earned it. I worked for it. Whatever the case is, or they would say that you like this, as they would say in Smith Barney, remember this commercial? We earned money the old-fashioned way. Right? We earned it, right? We'd say we inherited it. No, but they say we earned it, right? So person earns it, it's based on the work of their hands. That's what they're going to say. Somebody like that, are they going to have humility? Some will. There might be some altruistic people out there, but most people who are successful like that, they're going to walk all over people. Their character traits will be an absolute Shrek. It'll be horrific. These type of people. Anyone knows people that have money. They're not so philanthropic, right? They, some people may remember their humble beginnings, right? Some will, some won't. whatever the case is, I'm not gonna, someone will hammer me, and troll me and say, what, do you think everybody, look at this person, look how much money he gives to charity, look at that, okay, there are exceptions. There are exceptions. Most people who have money do not want to give it over. Doesn't matter how much money they have. They just want to make more money and open up more businesses, right? They don't want to help others. They'll say, let them help themselves. But I don't want to digress here. The point is somebody like that who says, well, God's always with me and he answers my prayers, but I don't do what you do. Why do you think he's answering your prayers? Is he answering your prayers because you're doing the right thing? Now you're going to question me and say, how do you know you have the right thing? How do you know there are 80,000 different religions? We only know a handful, right? But how do you know you're doing the right thing? That's not the purpose here, right? We know it's the right thing. Watch my videos on Tanakh Talk, proof that God exists, proof that the Torah is true, right? We went through a whole bunch of proofs. That's not the issue. But if you're doing the wrong thing and you're not doing according to us, and we're the only ones that matter, and that you can say, well, you're so egotistical, this and that. I spoke to someone last week, right? I always bring up these interesting things because no one would believe it would happen anyway, right? So, I had this discussion, and it was about, one of my daughters said, she's not ready to get married. It's only 18. She'll be 19 right after Passover. So usually get married 20, 21, something like that. 25 is already considered like a little bit old, in our community. But the question comes up. I said, well, in our community, there's probably about a 95, 96, or let's say 93, 94% success rate when it comes to marriage, and when it comes to passing it down to the next generation, right? So what's the divorce rate in the secular world? 50%. Higher. If you live together, it's higher. It's like 70%. Like Victor Miller, blessed memory, one of the Torah giants of the last generation. He says, how do you kill a good romance? Get married. Right? So if you're living together, I'll just throw this out there. Why, if a person's living together, they get married, why is the propensity for divorce 10 times higher? I shouldn't say 10 times higher. It's more significant, right? If divorce rate is, let's say, 55%, then if you live together, divorce rate goes up to 70%, right? Or 65, it goes up 10, it goes up another 5 percentage points, 10 percentage points. Why should that be? And that makes sense logically. If you're already living together for so many years, what does the piece of paper do? Right? In other words, you're going to tell me it obligates you. You're right. Because the person's milking the cow for free. He's got no responsibility. Right? If you remember in the 80s, right? So you may remember this. There was a famous court case with the actor William Hurt. Right? William Hurt, Broadcast News. I don't know if anyone remembers. Right? Made this famous movie. He was a famous actor. And He was living with a woman, had a few kids. Right? Lived in, I think, South Carolina. Had a few kids. He walked away. Right? He walked away. So she wanted half his money. And he's like, no dice. Like, yeah, go walk off a short pier. Right? So what did she claim? Common law marriage. Now, if they were Noahides, how does a Noahide get married? You don't need a go in front of a judge. Right? You don't need a civil marriage. If you live together, the Rambam says, that's marriage. If a person walks away, that's divorce. I don't need a piece of paper. Now, in the States, in general, not all states hold of common law marriage, right? On the books, some of them do, a lot of them don't. So as I remember, and I don't think my memory is that faulty, but I do remember she won something, but she didn't get half.
No. Because
even though she claimed common law marriage. Now, even though he had a few kids and he said, okay, I'm out of here. Now, if you have a civil marriage, right? So now you have obligations. You can't just walk away, right? You have to go through a court process, how much you're going to give for alimony, all these different things, right? A person's not necessarily going to want to do that, and it makes it not as fun, let's say, right? So if that's the case, then once someone gets married, even if they were living together for years and years, a lot of those marriages end up in divorce as a higher percentage. It's a higher percentage than divorce. So now you ask, why should that be a higher percentage? Very simple. Because now I have greater obligation. Now I have a piece of paper. That's telling me I have obligations. If I have obligations, not as much fun. Anyway, the point I made is, well, in our community, right, we have at least a 90% success rate. Let's say, I said, let's argue, let's say there's a 10% dropout rate and there's a 10% divorce rate in the ultra-Orthodox community. Let's say, could be, right? It's probably about 5 or 6%. I said, let's say it's 10%. Right? The person comes back. I said the secular world, what is it? 50%. It's 60%. Right? It's 5 or 6 times higher. Easy.
Yeah.
So the person comes back and says, well, you're not taking into account maybe there are a lot of people in bad marriages. Okay, that could be. And they don't want to get divorced, but not because there's no such thing as divorce. The Torah says, it's on the books. The Torah says if a person, they don't get along, they go for help, it's not working, they can get divorced. But obviously you have to try and work it out. You don't want to work it out, okay, right? So a person's gonna, the Torah says you can get divorced. Where this is not Catholicism. We're not saying about absolving anything or annulling anything. Torah says you're allowed to get divorced. Now, could it be there are people in bad marriages? Yes. And they won't get divorced for any number of reasons? Yes. But you want to tell me it's because, the community this and the community that, and they're going to force it. That's nothing to do with forcing, right? There are plenty of people divorced. There are plenty of people divorced. So it's not like divorce doesn't exist, right? So my argument was, just to try and get something in, because the person's not going to listen anyway, right? The argument was that we have a much, much higher success rate in marriage, in passing Judaism down, etc. What we do works. There's a 60 to 70% dropout rate in the secular Jewish community, right? When it comes to intermarriage and when it comes to assimilation. So I said, you can claim what you want. We have a much higher success rate. I'm very much, most people know I'm very much into statistics. So statistics don't lie. You can manipulate them, true, right? But in this case, even if it's a little bit higher, even if I would agree it's 10%, right? It's a 10% dropout rate, it's 10% divorce rate. I think it's high. But let's say that would be the case. Doesn't that mean 90% of the time it works? That's what it means. Now, you want to break it down? No, it doesn't really work that much because, they're being forced to. It's a cult. It's it. Now, obviously, you don't know anything about Judaism, so you can't make any claims. Right. I mean, you can watch, like someone said they were watching something on Netflix, some
documentary,
Jewish themed thing. One of them watched was Shtisel. I don't know if anyone's watching it, whatever. There was something else. I forget the name of it. And it's about somebody from the ultra-Orthodox community that went sour. So obviously they have an axe to grind, right? Obviously they have a bias about the Orthodox community. So my answer was, well, that's very interesting because, if you put out a headline out there that dog bites man, no one's going to read it. If you put a headline, man bites dog, everyone's going to read it, right? So I said, if the Orthodox community does so many good things, it doesn't get publicity.
No.
This guy stole. This guy did something else. This guy is a pedophile. This, whatever. Okay. I'm not saying we're perfect. I'm not saying the community is perfect, right? But if you're gonna, unfortunately, a lot of people doing the wrong thing. A lot of people that steal, do other things. Okay, right? That's a bad reflection on the community. Doesn't mean everybody's doing it, right? There are a lot of good people doing the right thing, right? And and when the system works, it works very well. If you don't fit in the system, it's hard, right? It's definitely much harder, no question. But in the end, people are being taught the right values. If they're being taught the right values, not a problem in the families. No, there are other issues that can take someone to go astray. That's for sure. But all things being equal, it should work most of the time. In the secular world, it's a free-for-all. If your kid comes out normal after they go to university and college, it's a miracle. I think it's an absolute miracle. I don't want to hear about morals. I don't want to hear about this. You make it up as you go along. And when you make it up as you go along means nothing, right? Doesn't mean it's absolute. The Torah has absolute morals. Yeah, question.
Well, I mean, just in response to your make it up as you go along, I mean, especially for us out here in the 70 nations, for us, a lot of times it's more our learning curve, the journey Hashem has us on. We just don't know. It's never been taught to us. We just haven't heard it correctly. I mean, we're almost lost. The point is, doing whatever we want is definitely a bad thing. But learning, if somebody's on that curve upward and learning and growing, I mean, they're not technically making it up as they go along, but they are learning, and there is a flip.
No, that's something else. That's if they have proper guidance.
Right.
But people have gaiva. People have hubris. They think they're God's gift to the world. They say, listen, I'm not a fool. I'm not going to fall into this trap. I'm not going to look like him, wear a black hat and all that. I'm not going to do that. So I'll do it what my mind tells me to do. I'm not going to listen to anyone. But the problem is, and this is a huge problem, which boggles the mind, and that is that people have all kinds of ideas, foreign ideas to the Torah, and think their opinion is just as valid as anyone else's. In other words, I don't believe in this, or I can't believe, when the Torah says you shoo away the mother bird. Oh, get all the PETA activists, right? You take the eggs, or pet activists, PETA activists, whatever you call them, right? And all of a sudden they're going to say, you know what? You take the mother bird, you shoo away the mother bird, and take the eggs. That's an act of cruelty. Well, you know what the Talmud says on that? First of all, before we get to the Talmud says, the Torah says you get long life for doing that. There's only one other mitzvah. A person gets long life in the spiritual world, in the next world. That's for honoring parents.
Right.
That's it. So now you want to tell me I took the mother bird, I pushed her away, took a broom, and I went, bam, with my Louisville Slugger, I pushed her away, and I take the egg drop soup. God says, you know what? You're going to get long life. All the PETA activists are going to say, you're a murderer. You're cruel. Right? So it says the Talmud, more than 2,000 years ago, what do the rabbis tell us? Not an act of cruelty. Right? If you say it's an act of cruelty, you're a heretic.
Right.
It's because your world outlook doesn't fit in with what God says.
Right.
Now,
Skewed.
we'll go back and put on my George Byrne glasses. You really think you're God? You really think you understand? You understand the mitzvahs? 80% doesn't make sense logically. You've never read the Torah. You can't read Hebrew. You don't know anything, right? At least admit you don't know anything. And if you don't know anything, why in the world do you think you have an opinion? Right? And this happens all the time. Nobody would do it with, Stephen Hawking and say, oh, I read this book. I read this article, Wikipedia. I'm going to knock you out in physics. I don't think so. Right? I'm going to knock off Einstein's, theory of relativity because I read this article by someone. I don't think so. Right? You're not going to do that. In this, you'll do that because it gives me an answer to say, oh, these are antiquated laws. Oh, this doesn't make sense. And I'm going to do what I want. So, but if you've never learned and you don't understand, don't you think possibly that the way that your viewpoint is skewed? It's probably skewed, right? You speak to, a great rabbi once said that, he's speaking to all these feminists, and he was going to speak about women in Judaism, how the Torah looks at women. So he asked them, right? I'll tell a joke first that I went to Columbia University. There's a girls' school. It's called the Barnard School for Women, and it's a pretty feminist place, right? So the joke is, how many Barnard girls does it take to screw in a light bulb? To say, hey, first of all, we're women. Second of all, joke's not funny. So on that, so the great rabbi gets up and he says to all these feminists, he says, is there any difference between men and women? And they all go, no. He goes, okay, let me ask the question again. Are there any differences? Any differences you can think of between men and women? And they're still looking at him. So he says, okay, women can give birth. That's a difference, right? There might be other differences, physically, spiritually, right? But people have been brainwashed. They can say, I've been brainwashed, thank God, right? But they'll say, they've been brainwashed because society is going to say we're just as equal. We're just as valid. We're not saying, we're not saying that at all. We're saying that they're created differently. They have different functions of what they're supposed to do. If they were supposed to do the exact same thing, right? In other words, they're supposed to pray 3 times a day with 10 men. But I got a whole bunch of kids. Too bad. Find a babysitter, do something. if God wanted everyone to be the same, he would have made them the same, right? Meaning the same obligations. But obviously it's not the case, right? They have different obligations, different functions. So the problem is that what we see in the world, and we, in the because of the media and everything else, it's a very skewed thing. They're trying to tell you what, this is the norm today, right? The LGBT, community, that is the norm. So you're gonna teach 5-year-olds, how do you know you're supposed to be of that sex, right? Maybe you're supposed to be a different sex. Maybe you're supposed to, I don't know, all these different crazy things. They want to show that that's the norm, right? Who's to say, why in the world are you going to teach that? If a girl's a girl and a boy's a boy, you don't want to change them. Why in the world do you want to change them from what they are? Could some have more tendencies towards one than the other? Could be, right? Could be wired a little bit different, but again, if you go through what the Torah says, obviously we believe that the Torah is true. If you go by what the Torah says, then there's no room for that. It might mean a person needs to get help, whatever, but teaching that as a norm, right? As a normative lifestyle goes against everything that the Torah says, right? And they're not a small minority over here. They got a lot of power. They got a lot of clout, right? Mr. Obama, what did he do before he left office? One of the more stupid things he did before giving billions of dollars back to Iran. That's a whole other story, right? But what did he do? He went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court allowed same-sex marriages. Now, the Medrash says if you allow any country, any place that allows same-sex marriages with a document of marriage, right? In other words, a ketubah, a marriage document. You have a marriage document between two people. You make that legal, that place is going to get destroyed. At some point, that place will get destroyed. So, you want the Supreme Court to do that. You want to say it's normal, right? Judaism comes out very strong, right? Book of Genesis, what does it tell us? It tells us a man should cleave to his wife. Doesn't say he should cleave to his same sex. And how do I know that's true? Because the Torah later says, Book of Leviticus chapter 18, a man can't be with a man, right? A woman can't be with a woman, right? That's rabbinical, right? A woman can't be with a dog, right? Same thing, Torah prohibition. So if the Torah tells me a man with a woman and a man can't be with a man, that their Torah's telling me that's the norm. The norm is a man with a woman. That's the norm. So now you want to come and rewrite history, which a lot of people are very good at, forgetting exactly what history says, right? The second biggest lie to Christianity, we mentioned it, we're not going to get into politics, is this idea of a Palestinian people. They don't exist. Go back to the Ottomans, right? Before the British. You didn't have a whole group. You didn't say, hey, you stole our land. We had this, we were here first. You didn't hear anybody saying that. You didn't hear that by the British either. Right? Montefiore bought up all kinds of land. Right? Rothschild bought all kinds of land. Sorry, this is Rothschild. Bought all kinds of land from the Arabs legally. It's not like they had an entity here. Right? But we're not going to go down there because they rewrite history. It's been the same lie over and over. Right? And it's unbelievable. It's like people say, oh, check the facts. Check the facts. Those are the facts. We, the Jewish people, the Israelis, made them into an entity, right? They and the UN, right? The UN helped them along the way, right? But the UN helped them make them into an entity. By Torah, they don't exist, right? In history, they don't exist, right? So there are plenty of people out there trying to rewrite history, and it's an unbelievable thing.
Amazing.
We see that today. I don't want to get into politics because I know I'll get in a lot of trouble here. There's been a number of lawsuits brought up, hundreds of affidavits of irregularities. I'm not going to say, the courts are going to overthrow it and whatever. People think it's conspiracy. They can say what they want. Hundreds of affidavits don't lie. It's under the guilt of perjury. right? So people, so the left wing saying, "Oh, we don't have to say anything about this. We can suppress it." There's a lot of things going on today with what's going on in the media, suppressing information, rewriting history. This is, or trying to do it right in front of our eyes. Mm-hmm. And if this happens, God forbid, that means there's no integrity, in elections at all. And that's what America stands for. And that's why they're fighting so hard against it. Again, what's going to happen, what's going to happen with the courts, it's anybody's guess. Don't say there's no information, right? There's, read the two affidavits that were brought in Georgia and in Michigan. They have all kinds of so those are the cases brought there, all kinds of affidavits of regular people showing Democrats, Republicans showing irregularities. Is it going to change anything? I don't know. Don't tell me there's no information. Don't tell me, we don't have any information. They got hundreds of affidavits.
That's a narrative,
right?
Yeah.
What's the media saying? Oh, they're fanatics. Oh, they don't have any proof. Oh, they don't have this. They don't have that. They got a lot of people coming out. A lot of people. Okay, maybe they'll discredit some of the affidavits. I don't know what it's going to be, but you can't say there's no evidence. So that's a more important thing in a sense, because that can lead to chaos. That can show that America's really now going to be a banana republic, because there's no integrity. Right. If that's the case, someone's going to say they're willing to go to jail for perjury when they saw 100,000 votes show up in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night. I don't know. That's a hard thing to say. Someone's gonna lie and want to go to jail. Again, whatever it's gonna be is gonna be. I don't want to digress. I just want to show the point. That what we're seeing. This doesn't. Ethics of our fathers. Yeah, it's a couple hundred. It's 2,000 years ago, right? But what they're saying applies. Applies for all generations.
Right.
You don't see this by other things, right? Why is Torah unique? Why does King David say Torah's it's the space of the earth, and all the water and all the galaxies and all the universe, and all that, because of its ability to relate to us on a regular basis. It doesn't say, oh, these, how many times I heard people say, oh, these antiquated laws, come on. It doesn't relate to me today. Of course, it relates more than ever. You just don't want to listen. Right. Okay, if you don't want to listen, I can't help you. But you want to tell me it doesn't it doesn't relate. It's mind-boggling, right? What we're seeing.
Open your eyes.
What we're seeing today in so many different areas, right? Is exactly this, right? Is exactly this idea, or a continual idea of trying to rewrite history. And when you rewrite history, you can spew out the same lie, and the mind-boggling thing is nobody checks it. Nobody checks the facts, right? This idea of a Palestinian people. Look at the facts on the ground. Don't believe what the UN says. Go look. Go historically check. Is it true or it's not true, right? And the answer is, I'll cut to the chase. It's not true. And it's been shown not to be true, but you know what? They have a lot of power. And they have a lot of people drinking the same Kool-Aid, right? So, this idea that, that we'll get back to the original idea, that someone's going to say, well, God answered my prayers, right? So what do I care if he answered your prayers? Why did he answer your prayers, right? What are you doing that he answered your prayers?
Yeah.
And if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, there has to be something else going on.
Right.
Right. So I would direct everybody, to learn the book, Derech Hashem. You don't necessarily have to take my course, but my course is good. I'll give it a plug there. But Derech Hashem, the Ramchal speaks about what our purpose in life is, what we're doing here, how spiritual forces work. When it comes to this case, right, good and evil, our evil inclination, our good inclination, why the righteous suffer, right? This is critical, right? Why evil people seem to have it easy. Now, I'm not saying not everyone has it easy. They're all evil, right? Not necessarily saying that. But if someone does have it easy and they spit in God's face, I could easily say, you're going to say, who are you to judge? Well, if they're not keeping Torah mitzvahs, they're not doing very much, and they are intermarried, let's say. So then I don't care if they know anything, they don't know anything. In the end, they're going to pay a serious price. The reason they have it easy, as the Ramchal says, is very simple. They have it easy because God had to reward them. He had to give them reward in this world. And that means he's going to wipe them out in the next world. That's what it means. It doesn't, the Muslims could also say, look, Allah answered all our prayers. Yeah, so if Allah is our God, right? They believe in the same God, right? It's not really considered idolatry, but even if it's not, God can keep them on the same path that they're going in order to flatten them like a pancake later, right? So if a person's not doing the right thing, God could just have him go in the same direction. Say, wow, God answered my prayer. See, I don't have to keep Shabbos. I don't have to do these other things. God's answering my prayers. So if God's answering my prayers, I'm good. That's not good.
Not necessarily.
Obviously, you're going to pay a price later. If you want me now, if you say, well, if that's the case, really, what does the Torah say? What am I supposed to do? Okay, right? Then you have to learn, but don't think you're getting a free ride. Don't think that, I'm going to do what I want and it doesn't matter. And look, God, God's there all the time. It's deceiving, right? It's deception. It could be that is true, but in the end, there could be many, many other things that are going on, right? So back to our Mishnah here, that the Mishnah says that you're going to work for the community, right? What does it say over here? Do it for the sake of heaven, right? You're not doing it because I want to get reward. You're not doing it because I want my name on a plaque, right? You're helping the community, and you shouldn't think as well, this is all my doing. We're going to see, right? That's not really all my doing, but it's certainly the merit of their forefathers. But they're getting credit, right? So a person has to remember whether, as we mentioned at the beginning, that if a person is successful in business, they're successful in other things. It doesn't necessarily have to do with IQ, right? In other words,
opportunity is
God wants
opportunity.
them to be successful. He wants them to have it easy for whatever reason, because there are plenty of people out there that make money and they don't have brains, right? The Chovos Levavos and Duties of the Heart, he says the person is going to be allowed to make a living if he's got brains. God will give him brains to make a living. If he doesn't have brains, right, he's not so smart, he'll give him brawn, right? He'll give him brawn. It'll make him strong or whatever, and he'll be able to work that way. But God's going to make sure that each person, according to their level, etc., is going to be able to make a living. Either they'll have brains or they'll have brawn, right? Maybe some will have both. Both don't necessarily go hand in hand. Doesn't necessarily mean it's not the case, right? But a person shouldn't think, I did this, and I did that. So the idea is we're not taking credit for ourselves. We mentioned by the Shemona Esrei, the Amid, the silent meditation, whatever you want to call it, the main prayer of every prayer service, we're showing our credentials. That means we don't have our own credentials. We are going on the coattails of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and we're saying, God, answer our prayers based on their merit. Now, we're not praying to them, right? We're certainly not praying to them.
Big difference.
But they have much greater merit than we'll have in 20, 30, 50, 100 lifetimes, right? They were the greatest people ever created. Now, if we were to come ourselves and we were to say, God, we have our own coattail, God is going to have a good laugh. He's going to have a good laugh, just like he does with the Cleveland Indians of old, right? Go ahead, try and put on a baseball team there. Good luck, right? They're never going to be good, right? And whatever, the last number of years, okay, they've been pretty good. But in general, you can huff and puff. God doesn't want it to go, right? It's not going to go. So over here, serving in the community, right? A person shouldn't say, look at the accolades I'm going to get. What compensation am I going to get? Person, if they're thinking that, they're in the wrong profession, right? In other words, you are going to take credit, and the fact that you're going to take credit, really, you don't deserve it. Even if you put your best foot forward, the credit, again, we're going to see why. The credit is going to come from the merit of the forefathers of that place. Now, let's take it one step further before I go on. Rabbi Lopian, a blessed memory, one of the Torah giants of the last generation, very big Baal Musar, said that if a person wants to have long life in this world, what should he do to have long life in this world? They should work with the community, right? They should be involved in the community. Why should they be involved in the community? Because if they're busy helping others and they're, that, first of all, that's a merit for them. Second of all, if they're doing very good things, then the community needs them. And if the community needs them, then even if a person sins, etc., maybe they sinned enough that God said, okay, I want to take them out of this world, through the merit of what they do with the community, that staves off a person being killed. That would stave off any diseases or any of these other things, because they have an unbelievable merit over here. They're needed. They're needed to help out with others. And therefore, since the community needs them, it's like a shield, right? It's like a shield against these other things where God could really say, you know what? You did this, you did that, you did the other thing, and, I'm tired of this. And finally, God can say, okay, I'm going to make the final decree, and it's going to be over, right? But if a person is needed in the community and they help out others, unless someone's going to take their place, so to speak, let's say there's no one in place, God's going to keep them around, right? Why is God going to keep them around? Because they have a tremendous job, right? Their job is serving the community. So therefore, it's like a shield, right? 100%, it is going to be a shield, against God taking them away, even if they deserve it. So says Rav Lopian, if a person wants to merit having long life, that's a good way to do it, right? Wow. That would push away, anyone dying relatively young, or anything else, because again, that reward, that shield is going to, is going to stop, it's going to stop any negative things, seemingly from happening. Clear, so good. Thank you. So that's really one explanation. It only took an hour, right? That's only one explanation. Another explanation, as we mentioned, that Hillel says, if I'm here, everything's here, right? If I'm not here, no one's here. So what does that mean? Sounds like, again, him being conceited. But what does that mean? Obviously, if you read Psalms, you see he's the most not conceited person there is. He never complains, and he has all these trials and tribulations, and all he does is praise God and says, listen, you got to help me. You're the only one that can help me, etc. And we learn out from here that a person helps the community, obviously for the sake of heaven, and a person should stand tall like a cedar tree, right? Cedar tree, very, very tall, very strong, and they recognize what their place is, the influence they can have on others. Now, it also means that when things are done right, and if a person is truly humble, then they can accomplish unbelievable things. Now, if that's true, and a person is really humble, and he's not ramming it down people's throats and all that, then the message they want to give should be more readily accepted. In other words, if they are trying to do things in a staunch way, in a heavy way, in a way where, people get offended, or people think they're preaching, or any of these things, no one's really going to want to accept it. Why? They'll say, oh, he's got a person has an agenda, or other things, but if he's doing it right, and the person is truly humble, they can accomplish unbelievable things. In other words, what they say is going to be more readily accepted. It says the Talmud, page 40b, tells us that a person should learn Torah, keep mitzvahs, even not for the sake of heaven. Why? Because if he does it not for the sake of heaven, it'll lead to doing it for the sake of heaven. Now, what do we learn over here? We learn that we're talking about doing mitzvahs, even if we're not doing it for the right reason. Let's say, he gives charity because, I don't know, his heart tells him to give charity. He's not doing it because there's a direct command to do so. He's doing it because, I don't know, any number of reasons. But he's not doing it for the sake of heaven. So then the question is, okay, even if he's not doing it for the sake of heaven, the influence of learning and keeping mitzvahs eventually will be for the sake of heaven. Because the more a person learns, even if you want to say, well, a person's going to learn and, there'll be what we call as my Rebbe's Rebbe, Moshe Schneider, blessed memory, would say, don't become a frugal student, right? Don't become an ultra-Orthodox student. Don't learn Torah and keep mitzvahs, like you're learning any other discipline, right? So somebody like that, that's not Torah anymore, right? In other words, they're learning it because they enjoy it. Very good. So what if they enjoy it, but if they see it doesn't have any effect on their life, and they're just learning it for mental gymnastics, that's not Torah. But there's always a but, and the but is that even if they're not doing it for the sake of heaven, the power of Torah is so strong, it can influence a person to go in the right direction. Right? So then the question is, okay, if you're telling me you're working with a community and a person's obligated, why is it that a person's working with a community, he's obligated to do it for the sake of heaven? Now, simply, we already answered that, right? And the answer is that you don't want to do it for ulterior purposes, right? For ulterior motives. You don't want to do it so you get a name on a plaque. You don't want to do it so people will pat you on the back, and all that. You want to do it because, you believe it's the right thing to do, right? You're doing it for the sake of heaven. Comes along when the Torah giants more than 150 years ago, of Chaim Brisker, of Chaim Soloveitchik, a blessed memory. He explains that keeping the mitzvahs of learning Torah, a person can do not for the sake of heaven, like the Talmud says, and still be considered as if he did the mitzvah. In other words, even if he's not doing it for the sake of heaven, right? It's certainly a much lower level, right? Remember way back when we said that it's better to keep Torah mitzvahs, certainly for the sake of heaven, right? You don't want to keep Torah mitzvahs not for the sake of heaven,
right?
Right? So we spoke quite a bit about that, and it's a lower level. It's a much lower level. Nonetheless, over here, that someone who works with a community and he's doing it for honor, he's doing it for their benefits, then who's he working for? He's not working for the community, right? He's working for himself. He's working for it, let's say, for a paycheck. He's working for it, for a name, to get himself a name. It'd be like somebody who builds a synagogue. Let's say, someone's commissioned to build a synagogue, and they charge an absolute fortune for the work, right? If he charges, again, more than he should charge, right? So he's showing he's not doing it for himself and not for the people, right? In other words, he's making this great edifice, and he's being compensated. Now, it doesn't mean he has to work for free, right? No question, but if he's doing it for the sake of, I'm going to make this fortune, I'm going to do this, he's not doing it for the fact that people are going to go there and pray, right? He's not doing it for the sake of people who are going there to learn. He's doing it to have such a great place, it's going to give him a good name. Now, again, if he does it right, and he makes it in the right way, people are going to say, wow, I want to get this person, to build this or to build that. We're not talking something like that, right? In other words, if he's got a good name, good, but he's not building it to say, oh, look, I'm the one who did this. I'm the one who did that, right? It's very easy to say that, right? Because say, this is a place that Chaim built. This is the place that, whatever, in order to give the person a name, right? That is not the reason he's doing it. Okay, let's say you have a scribe, and you get a scribe to write a Sefer Torah, right? To write a Torah scroll. Now you're going to pay him, compensate him, whatever it costs, etc.
Well,
he's not writing the Torah scroll. I mean, he's writing it for, to make money for himself also, but he's not writing it for his own sake, right? He's writing it for people to use it. He's writing it for people, to hear it being read from. Yeah, he'll get a name if it's good, if his workmanship is good, if his interaction is good, etc. But he's not doing it for himself, right? He's doing it for the sake of the people. right? That's one thing to keep in mind. Comes along Rav Yisrael Salant, of blessed memory, the founder of the Musar movement, and he explains over here that for the sake of heaven means what are their actions for the benefit of the community. Again, it's not for a person's own benefit. Now, even if you get benefit, whatever it is, that's not the reason. Person's doing it for the sake of heaven. He's helping others, right? If they're helping others, that's a whole different, that's a whole different thing. So what do we see over here? What did the Mishnah say, right? Let's get back to the Mishnah here. The Mishnah says if you exert themselves for the community, right, you should do it for the sake of heaven. Because even though it's for the sake of heaven, it's really from the merit of the community's forefathers. So the first part is 100%, where's it coming from? It's coming for the sake of heaven, right? A person has to be in it to help the community. Now, normally I would say for sure it's going to be for the sake of heaven, because it's not like everything goes smoothly when you work for the community. Why'd you say this? Why'd you do that? A person get a lot of flack, right? A tremendous lot of flack. I'm sure you don't know. I'm sure you don't know anything about that.
Oh,
you can get unbelievable amount of flack, right? For all kinds of things, even when you're trying to help, right? I've gotten my share also. Oh, you think this, you think that, you got trolls, you got other things. What my Rabbi says, if you're doing the right thing, let's say a person's the rabbi of a synagogue, right? He said, if you're doing the right thing, they should be trying to run you out of town. He said, if they're not trying to run you out of town, you're not doing your job right.
Ooh.
Right? A job of somebody, specifically, rabbi of a synagogue is not necessarily to make his congregants feel good.
No.
In other words, he can speak on Shabbos and speak about something, esoteric, telling, a few nice stories about the Parsha, and never mention that desecrating Shabbos is forbidden. Or never mention there's reward and punishment.
Right.
Never mention there are repercussions for our actions. Why not? Doesn't want to lose people.
Right.
Right? It's getting salary. God forbid, you actually say the truth. People say like, you can't do that here. You don't know how to speak about that here. People like fluff. They enjoy fluff. They enjoy good stories. They enjoy being entertained. They enjoy all kinds of things except the truth. They don't want to hear people are going to suffer. They don't want to hear the repercussions. They want fluff. They enjoy fluff, and that's what sells. Someone who's going to speak fire and brimstone and tell you the way it is, obviously not going to listen to me. Right? Don't listen to other people either. Okay. Right? You want fluff, or in my language, I ticked someone off a few weeks ago by saying, as I said, if you want fantasy, you got fantasy. So someone said, what, if people don't think like you, it's fantasy? I said, no, I just said that the other so-called, Jewish movements obviously don't work. They're 60% into marriage, right? All kinds of assimilation. So even if you want to tell me what they say is true, or I like it, or whatever, but it doesn't work, you can't pass it down. Now, if the Torah tells me many times it's forever and it doesn't work, there's a problem.
Right.
Right? It's like, oh, you're a fanatic. I know I'm a fanatic. Doesn't matter. Right? But the bottom line is you don't want to hear there's right and wrong. Right? You just want to say, well,
give me the fluff.
Who's to say your way is right? First of all, you have to argue that my way isn't right. You have to show me why it isn't right. And you say, well, look at these other movements. Look, what about them? They're 150 years old, right? They're less than 200 years old. They're less than 200 years old. You have to understand, everyone was Orthodox before that. Some more, some less. So they came and changed things. Now, if you tell me they changed things just by pure logic, and you can't pass it down, it means it doesn't work. But they're not even interested in that. But that is the point. That, why do you say it's your way? Show me another way that works. Show me another way that makes sense. Show me where the Torah is not true. Right? By any other so-called religion. You can do it with Islam. You can do it with Christianity. Very easy. Not my job, but very easy to show all the problems, all the inconsistencies. Find it in the Torah, then the Torah is not true. But see, most people don't even care. They're like, it doesn't really matter. It is, it isn't. No, that is the point. That is exactly the point. Because if it's not true, I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be listening to me. Nobody would be listening. Because you want to do whatever you want to do.
Right.
If you tell me I got systematic proof it's not true, okay, let me see. Let me see the evidence, right? Just like the presidential election. Let me see the evidence, okay? They're going to bring you the evidence. Now, let's see if it's true or not. Let's see what the courts say. Don't say there's no evidence, right? That's just a crock. We got plenty of evidence, a lot of evidence. You don't want to see the evidence. You're not interested in the evidence. You just want to do what you want to do, right? And that was more
told
what
it's okay.
What the on the last week's parsha that we just read today, Torah portion of the week. That's what I spoke about, right? That was really the main, the main topic, and it's not about truth, right? It's all about saying, I want to do what I want to do, right? So now we're gonna get something a little bit scary here, and that is the Talmud Sanhedrin 9a tells us the following: tells us that the punishment for someone hanging around evil people. Right? What is the punishment for someone hanging around evil people, even if you don't do what they do? You're just hanging around them. Right? What's the punishment? The punishment if someone hangs around evil people is severe. Why? Why is it so severe even if I don't do what they do? Because they get judged for doing the terrible things that these people do, even if you don't do them. So a person hangs around with someone that blasphemes, someone that goes against God, is a habitual speaker of Lashon Hara. You don't rebuke them. You sort of, you say, well, I can hang out with them. I'm just, I won't listen. I won't go in their bad ways or whatever. Just listening to them, hanging out with them, not say, even if you don't say anything, it's just as severe as the action itself. But a person's going to get upstairs after 120 years. You're going to say, come on, I didn't do it. He did it. I'll blame him. Right? He did it. You're right. He did it. But you hung out with him. If you hung out with him, it's bad. Right? It's just as if you did it. Comes along the Vilna Gaon. Rav Elijah Vilna, blessed memory, more than 250 years ago, explains. So what does that have to do with us? Right? What does that have to do with helping out in the community? He explains someone's helping others do mitzvahs. This would be, I guess, the idea about doing kiruv, doing outreach, is looked at as if they themselves did the mitzvah. In other words, I teach somebody about putting on tefillin, right? And they say, great idea, I'm going to put on tefillin, phylacteries, whatever you want to call it. They put on tefillin, I get credit for that as well, right? Because I helped them, I taught them, so I get credit for doing it, even if I didn't do it, right? That's why a lot of the kiruv speakers say, listen, if you donate money, to us helping in our work, you get the merit for all these people that come back. You get a merit in their mitzvahs, and that's exponential, which is true. So we shouldn't look at somebody that's helping the community if they do more, if they do less, right? As long as they're doing it for the sake of heaven. Look at this, right? This is an unbelievable thing. If I'm doing it for the sake of heaven and I'm helping others, I get credit for the things they do that are positive, right? In my helping them. At the same time, if I just the opposite, if I hang out with evil people, if I hang out with evil people and I don't do what they do, I just hang out with them, even if they don't necessarily have an influence over me, right? This is an unbelievable novelty. Even if they don't have a influence over me, right? What's going to be? So the Talmud tells me I get the credit, God forbids, of actually doing those terrible things, right? The opposite is also true. If I help others, especially do mitzvahs, I get credit as if I did it, even if I didn't do it. But someone, if they're hanging out with someone and they didn't do anything wrong, and this other person does X, Y, and Z, why am I liable? I didn't do anything. I certainly didn't do anything wrong, right? But Talmud says you're guilty. Why are you guilty? And this is, again, somewhat difficult to understand, is that you're guilty by association. Being guilty by association means even if I don't do it, but I'm hanging out with the wrong people, then that is an unbelievable stench. And that stench goes on me or on somebody, even if they don't act on it. This is, this is a mind-boggling idea. So it goes both ways, right? I could pay the price. I could definitely pay the price, just hanging out with somebody if I do the wrong thing. And I could get all the merits for helping others even if I don't do the action, right? In other words, if I influence somebody to do the right thing, I get credit if I did it. That's a tremendous thing, right? But there's a flip side, and the flip side's a lot scarier because people are going to say, I don't care what this person does. I don't care how they act. I don't act that way, right? I don't do that. But the Talmud says you're guilty by association.
Well, needless risks.
Now, most people would say, come on, that's not logical, right? That's not necessarily logical. But the question is, who's to say that they're not going to have an influence on you? We think that, we're made of stone and what someone says doesn't affect us. Even what they say, I'll give an example. This week's Parsha mentioned over Shabbos, my Shabbos table, mentioned that the Torah says when Lavan, or Laban, however you want to pronounce him, Lavan, God comes to him in a dream, right? Before he confronts Yaakov, God comes to him in a dream, and he says, whatever you do, don't say anything to him good or bad. Right? So when he confronts Yaakov, he said, God came to me and he said, I can't say anything good or bad to you. Right? So there's an obvious question. The question is, I can understand saying something bad. We understand something bad can have a negative effect. Right? You see by the evil prophet Bilam, he wants to curse the Jewish people. Right? Lavan's certainly not a prophet. He's evil, no question. Right? He's certainly not a prophet, even though God came to him. Right? Regardless, okay, if he says something bad, it can have an effect. So you're going to say sticks and stones. Okay, maybe you'll say sticks and stones, right? But something negative can have an effect, can have a tremendous effect. What about something good? What if he says something good? Something negative, I understand. It could have a bad effect. It certainly could have a bad effect. But what about something good? Why is saying something good something bad? Because something good, what does it do? It elevates the person in our esteem. In other words, even if they're not so good, but if they say something good, it's what it could be what we call chanifa. In other words, what's chanifa? Chanifa means someone's trying to brown nose, butter you up, be a good SAT word, be a sycophant, right? He's trying to brown nose, right? In my language. Maybe over here, he's not going to brown nose, right? But maybe Yaakov's going to let his guard down, right? In other words, you have an evil person say something good. Maybe we'll say, oh, maybe they're not really so bad, right? Maybe we'll let our guard down and not look at them the way they need to be looked at, right? So when we look at it in those terms, something good can also be something bad. Because unless a person truly repents, right? Someone who's evil, doesn't matter why they're evil. But if they're evil, even if they, unless they truly repent, I don't have to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Now, the Torah tells me, and we're going to see in Ethics of Our Fathers, probably in the next millennium, we'll get there one day, right? But it says you have an obligation to judge everybody favorably. Judge a person b'chaf zchus, right? You have to give them merit, right? If they do something wrong, I have to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? But that's not true. Not true 100%. Why not? It depends who the person is. If he's Torah observant, and we can understand, not everyone does the right thing at all times. Okay, so if you do something wrong, Talmud says I can assume at night he probably repented and that's the end of it, right? But what about somebody who's evil, right? What about someone who spits in God's face on a regular basis? Do I have an obligation, according to this, to judge him favorably? Survey says, I don't have an obligation. Why not? Because I know habitually they do the wrong thing. I know, I don't know every last thing, but they're not Torah observant in general. They may do a few good things here and there, right? But the majority things, they don't keep Shabbos, they don't keep the holidays, they don't keep kosher, right? That's pretty bad. They're intermarried, let's say, that's pretty bad, right? They're probably a million things they do wrong. If it doesn't matter what good things they do, they don't overshadow. They don't overshadow the wrong thing, right? I can't say it's 1 second. I can't say they're 51-49, right? It's probably about 98-2, and I'm being generous, right? It's probably higher than that.
Oh yeah,
right. But somebody like that, and and they're in a compromising situation. There is no mitzvah at all, just the opposite. I have a mitzvah to judge him not favorably. You're going to say, what a terrible thing. What a fanatical thing. You guys out of your mind? No, we're not out of our mind because the person has a track record. And we know that at least 70% of the time, if not more, and again, I'm being generous over here because I'm in a good mood, right? If it's 70% of the time, why is there a mitzvah for me to judge them favorably? I know 7 times out of 10 they're doing the wrong thing. If someone keeps Torah mitzvahs, right, we know them to keep Torah mitzvahs, I should give them the benefit of the doubt when I find them in a compromising position. If they're not observing Torah, there's no mitzvah at all, right? Why is there no mitzvah? Because they don't have any believability. They have zero believability, right? Now, if they did the right thing, okay, right? If they didn't do the wrong thing over here, no harm done. Even if I judge them favorably, if someone judged them not favorably, doesn't matter. If they didn't end up doing it, they're guiltless. I didn't transgress. You can't say, oh, you transgressed retroactively. No such thing. Why? Because there was no obligation. There was no mitzvah for me to judge them favorably at all. Question.
Yeah, no, the question being, what you've just been sharing is heavy. It's heavy in the sense that who can live it? Who can live it? Who can understand it? But more than that, is there not a clear point where Hashem knows the heart? And I've just seen so many diverse situations, Rabbi, or I've been in so many situations where it doesn't matter what I do, somebody's going to look at it in the wrong light. And I can't judge that person favorably at all anymore. The older I get.
That's a very good point, because in the end, we don't really care how people look at it. Now, we have to be careful. We have to be careful as a desecration of God's name.
Right.
Now, that's a very specific thing for a Jew. You can't desecrate God's name in front of 10 Jews. People throw this term around like they throw around turkey and cranberry sauce or CFL or who knows what. But there's a specific definition. There's a specific definition of desecrating God's name. Be that as it may, I've had people say, well, I think you're crazy. And I think, well, these non-Jewish kids, let's say, they're blood to you. They're blood related. You're right. 100% they're blood related. Right? But really, they're not related to you because your wife isn't Jewish. Now, that's a pretty harsh thing to say. It's a pretty strong thing to say. And I said, we don't hold by patrilineal descent. And the answer is, well, they're your blood. You're right. Technically speaking, they're blood. So they're what? They're second-class citizens? No, they're like any non-Jew. Just because they have a father that's Jewish and they have quote-unquote Jewish blood doesn't make them Jewish. It's on the wrong side. Right? But, even if you want to tell me, that, well, I hold by patrilineal descent, so what exactly do they do that's Jewish? Not very much. Right? So now the question is, my question was, and this sort of hit a raw nerve, and that is, well, 90% of world Jewry, right, are secular, right? They're not religious. They're, let's say they're Reformed, they're conservative, most are unaffiliated. Right, but they're all dying. They're all dying spiritually. So I asked this person. I said, so why in the world does it irk you? And you can say, well, I don't care what you have to say, whatever. But why does it irk you if I say, and I'm only 10% of the Jewish world? Why in the world does it irk you if I say they're not Jewish? Who cares what I say? right? A lot of people would say that. Who cares what you have to say? Okay, you're right. You don't have to care. So why are you getting so upset? Because I must have hit a raw nerve. What's the raw nerve? I'm delegitimizing the fact that what you've done is wrong. You've ended up intermarrying for better or for worse, or maybe mostly for worse. And okay, there are repercussions for your actions. If you would ask most Jews, today that, in the Bible, yes or no answer, are you allowed to intermarry? Don't give me but. Yes or no. And the answer will be no, but.
Yeah.
But it applies, not only applies this generation, applies that. Give me all kinds of answers. Right? So if you're not going to listen and you're not interested, then why should what I say matters? Because I'm your conscience now. Because deep down you understand it's wrong. Right? And deep down now you understand, or you should understand, that there's someone who's calling you out and saying your life is a sham. That means for the last however many years, you're not doing what you should be doing. And there's a price to pay. And again, the argument's never on truth. The argument's never on sources. The argument is, I'll do what I want, and you can't tell me otherwise. Wow. Well, did God give the Torah or not? That's not relevant to me. Why not? Of course it should be relevant, right? So, you could tell me, and this is what I said, you could tell me the Torah's anti-pig, Torah's anti-shrimp, right? Torah's anti-non-Jew in different ways. Could very well be. It just means we have an image problem. Right? That doesn't negate the fact, what you're telling me does not negate the fact the Torah is true. Doesn't negate it. You're just telling me I don't like this. And I think this. And you're not telling me anything. If we were, and I mentioned this also, probably hit a raw nerve as well. I said, if you're on a debating team, you get an F. You get less than an F. Why do you get less than an F? Because you don't know how to argue. We're not arguing in the same terms.
Right.
If you want to rip me to shreds, show me sources. Don't tell me I think this. Don't tell me, the Jews ate the same hallucinogenic mushroom in the desert, right? That's where the Torah came from. Don't tell me Saturn was out of orbit, and that's why all the plagues came. Give me some sources. Give me something, right? So you want to say, oh, you guys are fanatics. And so how does that make me look? That makes me look pretty bad. Right? But you know what? I said, I have 2,000 years or more of history behind me. I get all the great rabbis. I can go on their shoulders. You got nothing. Right? So you want to argue with history? Go ahead. You want to argue with me with facts. I don't, again, I have to be the best I can be. Yep. When I'm outside, I have to be very careful. How other people are going to look at what we do? 100%. And you're 100% right. No matter what we do, people could take it the wrong way. And that's why we have to be so careful. If someone takes it the wrong way, and I didn't do anything wrong, and they say, oh, the Torah this, the Torah that, and they blaspheme, I don't have anything to worry about. Why don't I have anything to worry? You can say, well, maybe he said it this way. Maybe he could have said it like that. Maybe I could have done all kinds of things. Maybe. But God's not going to hold you accountable for that. Because if you're speaking the truth and someone blasphemes and they think, oh, I think the Torah is this and that's, that's racist and that's this. Okay, they can say whatever they want if it's clear, white and white on black, black on white, and this is what the Torah says. Then you got a problem. You don't have a problem with me. I mean, you might have a lot of problems with me. You have a problem with exactly what the Torah says. So you can tell me the Bible's racist. You can tell me that. It's not based on very much. But you could argue that you could say, oh, you're making this up. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Do you believe in oral law? Do you believe in what the Torah says? You can't make that argument, right? So that's why I said, you don't know how to debate over here. This is not a debate about truth. This is a statement saying this is the way something's been done, and you have to deal with it. And my answer is there's right and wrong. I don't believe the Torah says it's right and wrong. Oh, really? So what are you saying exactly? What are you bringing up as proof? You're not bringing up anything as proof. You're saying this is what's been done. You have to deal with it. That's not an argument. Because, and what's this person going to think? Wow, you've been really brainwashed. Mm-hmm. Wow, I can't believe this is the fanaticism, that's coming out of Torah. No, this is what the Torah says. This is what God says. Okay, let's go back to the fundamental point. Did God give the Torah Mount Sinai? Yes or no? If he didn't give the Torah, then we're arguing in totally different planes. But my argument was, interesting thing, my argument was, even if according to you, the Torah is written by men, right? Documentary hypothesis, 4 authors and a redactor, which the person probably doesn't know anything about. But let's say you believe the Torah is written by men. So the Torah says, by this committee, don't eat shrimp. Now, what did the Torah mean by that? Didn't the Torah say that's forever? Man-made. Man wrote it, let's say. So if they wrote it, what does forever mean? Oh, I'm not getting in this argument with you. I'm not going down that path. Well, you got to give me answers. If you're not going to, again, this is a total waste of time in arguing because you're arguing in totally different planes. So they're going to think, really, God cares if you tear toilet paper, on the Sabbath. Does God really care about this? There are repercussions. Why would the Torah tell me 12 times if you desecrate Shabbos, you die in this world, you get cut off in the next? You think God was kidding? You think mankind was kidding? Why'd they write that? There are a lot of different things the way that the Torah can make, it can sound bad, right? It can sound anti-pig. It can sound anti-non-Jew in many different ways.
Of course.
Right? Just look at the Talmud. Watch my videos on Tanakh talk about all kinds of crazy statements in the Talmud. They have to be understood in context. But maybe the Bible, has an image problem. Could be.
Oh, it's
right.
holy.
Could very well be. It just means you don't understand it. You haven't looked into it. So how in the world can you make a claim either way? Mm-hmm. I wouldn't make a claim about, physics or whatever because I don't know that much about it. If I've read something about it, whatever. But if I'm unlearned, how can I say, oh, I think this and I think that? How can I derive at an opinion if I don't know the information? Mm-hmm. Now, looking at the information at face value, I agree. There are a lot of things that look bad, but doesn't mean it's bad. So we have to be the best we can be in all situations. If someone says, "Oh, I can't believe," we've gotten blamed for the virus and not holding by protocol. The whole world's not holding by protocol, right? The only reason it's higher, and the numbers have spiked in the Jewish community because everyone lives together. Everyone's close together. We have a lot of kids. Most people are getting it, in their house. They're not getting it from synagogue. I get this a lot also. You still going to synagogue? Yes. Everyone wearing masks? Not necessarily. But I said, recently there was a statistic out a number of months ago. What is the percentage of people who go to synagogue get this virus? Right? It was 4%. Most people were getting it from the house, from other people in the house that have it, and it gets to everybody, right? But the highest percentage was in schools, right? It was more than 10%. They just shut down here 27 different schools, right? Because it just went rampant through schools, right? So it's higher there, but you can't call the kettle black, on someone else. No, there's so many people not holding by the protocol. It makes no sense. The governor of New York, this idiot, wants to shut down synagogues when he allows everyone else to protest, no masks. So a couple hundred people went together in the synagogue and hold at least by some of the protocol. Why in the world are you going to shut down that, but these are not going to shut down? Oh, freedom of speech, right? Freedom of speech. Doesn't make sense, and thank God he got nailed by the Supreme Court. So just, they'll say, wow, the Orthodox are doing this. Well, let's look at the spike everywhere in America, right? 2 weeks ago, there were 600,000 new cases, and the vast majority were not in New York, right? Vast majority in Texas, California, right, and other places. I'm not saying there weren't any in New York, right, but the numbers have gone down. But you have to look at demographics, right? If you don't look at demographics, you can't say, oh, they're spreading the virus. Again, by demographics, I understand, but you have to look at the whole picture, and you can't have double standards.
Nope.
And they're unbelievable double standards, out there. Someone has a party, 100 people, and no one's wearing masks. Do they get cited? Are there any citations? No. They just work, they're working, going on synagogues, trying to shut down synagogues. So, they shouldn't have prayer.
You got it here, though.
It's crazy.
Or they're
Right?
shutting down
Why,
parties here, left, right, and center. I mean,
yeah,
they're
right.
slapping
So,
fines. Yeah.
right, these things aren't going on. Protests. Oh, they're allowed to protest. That's not a problem, and they're certainly not. Certainly not wearing masks and social distancing, right? So why are we singled out?
Yeah.
Right? You're gonna say, oh, but doesn't the Torah say you have to guard life? Come on, come on. You can't have it both ways. 100%, you can't have it both ways. So we should feel good in the sense that if people look at what we do in the wrong way, and we're doing everything in our power to do the right thing, and they say, oh, these Jews this and these Jews that or whatever, then that's their problem. We got enough to worry about. We when we're outside, when we're in a bank, we're in a post office, we're going shopping. So we have to be exemplary. Exemplary means you don't push in line, you don't shove, you don't this, so you don't give anybody any ammunition. Once the person pushes in line or cuts someone off and they look somewhat like me, the person's going to get cursed out. You Jews this, obviously it's not right to single out one group, but the problem is we're all intertwined. We mentioned this many times. All the Jews are intertwined, right? If someone in Italy cut someone off, they're going to say, we're going to burn every Italian flag. No more cannolis, right? We're going to boycott all the... it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist except by Jews, whether they're religious or whether they're secular. They'll blame it on us. So you can feel with a clear conscience, if you're doing everything in your power, and someone comes along and says, oh, I can't believe this, I can't, and you didn't do anything wrong, then there's
Hold
no
your
issue.
head up.
Yeah, there's no issue. And therefore we may think.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi.
We may think, why is someone going to say this or whatever? If we did something wrong, obviously, we should apologize or whatever. I didn't really mean it. Whatever the case is. But if you're doing the right thing, and this is what I said to this other person. I said, I said, so you're telling me the Bible has an image problem. I'm just telling you what the Bible says. I'm telling you what the rabbis say. So you have an issue with that. I understand. Because, you don't want to admit there's any right or wrong over here. Okay. Right? But that doesn't mean you're not giving me an argument that the Torah is not true. Mm-hmm. Someone calls you out on something, has nothing, and if you're doing the right thing, right, and they call you out for something you didn't do, or you're in that type of compromising situation, okay, you have to, you have to answer, but it has nothing to do with Torah mitzvahs over here, right? I don't know, if a person upholds the Torah, if someone walked by, let's give an example. Someone walked by, and I was shooing away a mother bird and taking the eggs. Right? And this Jew walks by, a secular Jew walks by, says, hey, what are you doing? I said, oh, it's a mitzvah from the Torah. You don't know? They're at a certain time, mother birds hovering over the eggs, right? You push away the mother bird, you take the eggs. Right? They say, why are you doing that? Well, I'm doing that because that's what the Torah tells me. This is the mitzvah. They say, how could that be the mitzvah? And that's cruel, and that's this, and that's that. Now, if you're getting chastised for doing a mitzvah, why in the world do I have to worry what someone says? I'm doing what God wants. Yeah. Right? I'm doing to the best of my ability what God wants. If someone comes out against it and says, I can't believe you do this, or I can't believe you, I'm going to lose any sleep because someone's ignorant, etc. I might get upset, whatever the case is. But in general, if I'm doing the right thing, I don't have to worry whatsoever what someone says. Now, they may not like it.
Yeah.
They may get offended, right? They certainly may get offended, and they could say, well, this doesn't fit my world outlook. So, who cares? Who cares? I don't, we have to answer. We have to answer for what we've done, right? Let's say in a negative way. If a person's done something wrong in a negative way, we have to answer, right? But if someone got offended by something we've done and we did everything according to what the Torah tells me to do, I don't have to answer for that. I certainly don't have to answer for that. That means they have an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to call something out that's not true. And if they want to call something out that's not true and I did it, so what? They can say what they want. It's totally irrelevant, right? It has no relevance to me. They can yell and scream. They can say anti-Semitic things. In the end, we have to do what God says. And the merit, I'll tell you what the merit is. Imagine someone yelling and screaming at you. You did the right thing. If you walk away, don't even answer, the merit's unbelievable.
Ooh,
right?
That's tough for me, Rabbi.
So the idea is that, we could have what to answer, and we could say all kinds of things. Come on, you never learned. You don't know. We have plenty of things we could answer. Doesn't mean they're going to accept it, right? But if you even if you just walk away and say, okay, you can think what you want. You walk away. You don't say anything. You don't answer the merits. Unbelievable. It's a hard thing. It's a very hard thing, because obviously if we're attacked, right, what's the first thing you want to do? You get defensive. You want to answer. And even more frustrating is when you have the right answer and there's no one home and there's no one to talk to. And that's, I can tell you from personal experience, extremely frustrating, because there's no point.
What are you here
there's
for?
No
yeah.
point. There's no point in that dialogue.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're going in totally opposite directions. You're not arguing on the same, you're not on the same battlefield. It's like I told this person that, if this was a debate, you get an F. That's not, it's not a way to debate. It's not a way to argue. You're not saying that the Torah is not true. You're not proving it. You're just saying, I can't believe this, and this is the reality,
right.
and this is that, and this is the other. Doesn't matter what you say.
Totally
right?
subjective.
It's relevant because you're wrong, but you're not arguing the same terms.
That's right.
And if I'm not arguing in the same terms, what am I wasting my time for? That's a good question. That's a good question, but it can be extremely frustrating, right? Definitely can be extremely frustrating. So what do we have over here? So if a person's going in the right direction, that's what we saw before. Person's helping out others. Unbelievable credit you get by helping others do mitzvahs. If a person even hangs around with the wrong people, in general, not just because that's your job and there are other people around you, but you're hanging around with other people because you enjoy hanging out with them, then you will get credited with wrong things that they do, even if you yourself don't do it. That is a mind-boggling thing. And, a person can say, well, they're not so bad. They're not this, and I'm not learning from them. Just hanging around from them is bad news, as we mentioned by Yaakov and Lavan. Even Lavan saying something good can have detrimental effect on Yaakov. Now, we mentioned before that you need a lot of humility over here. So therefore, if a person's helping out the community and they don't see their success based on their own action, right? In other words, God helped them, their forefathers helped them, etc. The merit they're going to get is that God will answer their prayers and going to help that person, right? The Talmud tells us, Tractate Yevamos 64a, Yitzhak and Rivka both pray to God, right? Why do they pray? They want to find out what's happening with Rivka's pregnancy, right? At the beginning of last week's parsha, right? The Esav and Yaakov fighting in the womb, who's going to inherit this world and the next world and whatever, the whole long story. But they entreat God. They pray. That's what the Torah says. They pray to find out what in the world's going on, right? And the Talmud tells us whose prayer is more accepted. The prayer of Yitzhak is more accepted. Why? Because Yitzhak himself was righteous, and he's the son of a righteous person. Now, Rivka, her father was evil, right? She reached an unbelievable level of spirituality. She separated from her evil father. She went on the path of God. And the Talmud says another place where Baalei Tshuva stand, people return to Judaism, didn't know very much about Judaism, become Orthodox Jews. A righteous person can't stand in the same place. So it sounds like a contradiction in a certain way. Now, isn't that righteous person greater? Because he's not tempted to sin. Like someone who returns to Judaism. Someone who returns to Judaism, he ate shrimp, did all kinds of other things wrong. He's got more temptation. Should be on a higher level. So in a certain way, that's true, except for the fact that someone who's righteous and they continually go in the right path, that's a harder thing to do. It's a much harder thing to do. So who does Yitzhak, who's his father? Avraham. Well, very easy. When you have a father like that, aren't you going to be righteous? Right? Wouldn't that make sense? He's going to go in that path? Not necessarily, but he's probably got a very good pedigree. If he's got a very good pedigree, he'll go in the same path, right? So therefore, when Yitzhak prays, he doesn't pray that he should be answered on his own merit. Yitzhak prays that he should earn the merit based on the merit of his forefathers, right? In other words, Rivka prays. She can't pray in the merit of her father, right? Her father was evil, so she's praying on her own merit. Now, she's also a prophetess, right? It's also on a high level in and of herself, but her credibility, quote unquote, comes through herself. Does not come through the level of her father. By Isaac, he reached a high level, but he was nothing compared to his father was, and he's walking somewhat on the coattails of his father, and therefore his prayers accepted. Why? Because he's not asking on his own merit. He's asking on the merit of Avram. Now, someone who comes and works with the community, his prayer is not going to be through himself. He's not going to say, God, he's not going to pray and say, God, let this go through. Let me help this person or that person, whatever, based on my own merit. Based on my own merit is like to say, well, I don't need anyone else. I'm doing
Pompous.
good. Yeah, pompous, right? Like some Reconstructionist rabbis at a funeral, right? I can't make this stuff up, right? It's at a funeral and someone says, oh, Rabbi, I see you don't have your book. Here, you can borrow mine. It's like, I don't know, some, rabbinic book for whatever, I guess give a eulogy or whatever it is. And this person looked at it and was like, young man, I don't need your book. Says, I write books. I don't need your book. Right? That's being conceited. Right? That is absolutely pompous. So he's saying, I don't need the merit of other people. I got my own merit. I got my own shoulders. That's being conceited. So if you say over here, you're going to pray that, this thing, I'm able to help other people and do this through, not yourself, but through your forefathers, right? Every Jew has forefathers that were religious, maybe not for a few generations, but you go a little further back, everyone was basically religious. So we do have that pedigree, right? Regardless, it's not based on ourselves. It's not based on my own merit. So I will tell you a little personal anecdote that happened to me many years ago. Many years ago, my mother's mother came to me in a dream. Now, we say that dreams don't mean a whole lot, right? It's usually a manifestation of our subconscious, other things we've gone through, could be bad anchovies, could be any number of things of why we have certain dreams, but a lot of it has to do with our subconscious. Talmud says 99% of all dreams absolutely meaningless, right? But a dream of a king, dream of a prophet is significant, right? Those are significant, but normally our dreams don't mean a whole lot, regardless. Now, my mother's mother, I guess, was somewhat traditional. Her parents were religious. And she came to me in a dream and said to me, don't think, you became religious on your own merit. Mm-hmm. Now, again, this is a dream I had. I'm not talking 500 years ago because I'm not that old. I'm not talking about 200 years ago. I'm not talking about 100 years ago, right? Talking, let's say, 30 years ago, maybe. Maybe less than that. Less than maybe 25 years ago.
You were a
something
young man.
Like that. Yeah, relatively, right? I wouldn't have all this white hair. Anyway, make a short story long. She came to me in a dream and said, don't think you became religious on your own. Don't forget I have parents. And it's through my parents and their merit, that's where you came from. Now, we can look at dreams in a number of different ways. I remember I was once in Boston, and I went to one of the older cemeteries where most of my family's buried. And I was with my mother at the time. And as I got to their grave, so by different people, I said different psalms, as I was there. So by this grave, I stayed a little bit longer. So when I was there, my mother's grandmother, so one of my kids is named after her. My mother didn't really know what her Hebrew name was, but I said to her, if you have anyone to blame how I turned out, it's right here. I said, it's your grandparents. So my mother said, what are you talking about? So not that far from where these people are buried, my mother's buried. So as we're going, I said, I'll tell you the story. And I told my mother the story. This is what your mother said to me. This was the dream that I had, or whatever, it was years before. I said, this is the dream that I had. So well, my grandparents were very religious. None of their kids were or ended up religious, but okay, this happened in America, right? So regardless of all that, I said, if you have anyone to blame, it's right here. You blame them. I said, dreams don't mean a whole lot. Most of my dreams have no meaning at all, right? This was a pretty significant dream. This was pretty significant. Now, it could be something I might have thought somewhere, whatever. This was the dream I had. I had a few significant dreams. That was one of them. And, we think, a lot of people think that what I do today is based on me. Everything I do, I took myself out of the womb. I became this. I did that, despite who my parents are, right? I heard someone say that. Not that they took themselves out of the womb. Their parents, whoever they are, I can understand, a person might have had issues with them. But my answer was, well, they didn't clothe you, right? They didn't bathe you. They didn't take care of your needs.
Yeah,
when you did everything yourself. So, no, that's not what I meant. I know what they meant. But the person is saying, I did everything myself. Who are they forgetting about? The big boss, right? As Mr. Trump would say. The boss, right? He's the boss. He's the one. But okay, I did everything myself. Not true. Person's got free choice. You can make the right choice. You can make the wrong choice, right? But there's no such thing, certainly by Jews, there's no such thing. We don't have the merit of our forefathers. There have been people saved from having an out-of-body experience by some, grandfather, great-grandfather that slapped them back in their body, that gave them some sort of merit. They eventually became religious, right? A number of stories like this. No one came out of a vacuum. Nobody. So therefore, we have that merit, right? Jews certainly have that merit. Well, you say non-Jews will want to convert, same thing, because their soul was on Mount Sinai, just got messed up, right? It got messed up through assimilation, through intermarriage, etc. Right? So what was the point of this dream? Right? The point of this dream that I had is never to forget that you're not on your own. That you think, oh, intellectually I saw this, and intellectually I did this, and I went from this point to that point to the other point, and then, everything came together. It doesn't happen by itself. Doesn't mean I didn't go through the motions. I didn't check things out, right? Anyone who's a Noahide or is a Jew wannabe, right? Or what I would say a JIT, a Jew in training, right? Somebody like that, obviously they have something else going on in their lives, right? That's brought them to this point. Church didn't make sense. This didn't make sense. They looked at this. They looked at that. They looked at other things. That's all true. So then why didn't their siblings see that? Right? I interviewed somebody. I was going to write a book about people who came back to Judaism, and someone who came back at the age of 35 and their kids were teenagers and, also became religious and all that. They said, the question isn't why did I become religious? The question is, why didn't my siblings become religious if we saw the same things? Right? Why did I have a merit they did not? Good question. Because you were willing to look at the information, they weren't. You were willing to see things, they weren't. Okay. I can say the same thing in my own situation, whatever. But in the end, this is something very significant. It's significant because it's not about us, right? It's about a person's desire for truth. You want the truth, the merit's there. It's somewhere. It's somewhere in the genealogy, somewhere in the pedigree, right? It can have a positive effect if you want it to. And if a person doesn't want it, the pedigree doesn't matter, right? And that could be, tremendous pain, certainly for a person in the next world. Let's say they were very righteous, but their kids and grandkids went off the path. If they were on the right path, we get all the merits because we taught them and sent them to school, to learn and all that. If they go in the wrong direction, we pay the price also, right? So here, my own family, my great grandparents' kids, none of them are religious, and most of their, let's say, grandkids or whatever, they're not Jewish. Forget not religious. They're not Jewish. Wow. So even if they were religious, I'm sure, listen, God's gonna, give them the merit, certainly give them the merit for the good things they did. But what about all those generations? What about all those generations later that they weren't able to pass it down? That's on the parents. And that's a scary thing. It doesn't matter why a kid goes off. It's on the parents. The parents are going to suffer. If they do the right thing, the kids go in the right path, the mitzvahs are exponential. You have kids, you have grandkids, when they're going in the right path, you get all those mitzvahs even after you die because you sent them in the right direction. If you don't send them in the right direction, or God forbid they go off, it's not necessarily your fault, right? It's not necessarily your fault, but even if it's not your fault, you're still held responsible, right? So, so the point is, as we're winding down, and I'm sure your board's going to explode soon. So in my case, again, I'm just like everyone else. I grew up like everybody else, even though I grew up Jewish. It doesn't matter. I grew up in secular schools. I went to Hebrew school for a couple years, but I was more interested more than anyone else. And I looked into it and I did it quote unquote on my own, but didn't happen on my own. Right. I had to learn years later, it had nothing to do with you. Right. You had a merit. And because you had that merit, and you had that desire, you had that bikush, that desire. So then that merit helped. And that merit turned the tide. And then one thing led to another. Didn't happen by accident. Right? Certainly didn't happen by accident. So a person can't think, I don't like we're speaking about here, which, I was pretty sure we're going to get to this. We'll get to it next week. And that is, what does it mean that the community's forefathers helped them? It's not based on their own merit, right? That's what we're saying. You have to put your best foot forward, but it's based on something else. And you're going to say, the previous generations doesn't mean anything. What do you mean doesn't mean anything? We don't necessarily see the effects. We don't see the effects. But even if we don't see the effect, doesn't mean it's not there. Now, again, person can say, maybe that dream you had is psychosomatic. Maybe it is. Right? I definitely had it. I don't think there's any question. Right? I definitely had the dream. I was definitely there. All three of us, me, myself, and I. All three of us were there. Now, again, wishful thinking, other things, maybe the whole point of having that dream is just to tell other people and say, listen, what we do, we're not on our own. We're totally not on our own every year. And everyone, certainly Jews, we all have a pedigree. Right? That pedigree goes back to Mount Sinai. But we have previous generations. Remember, as I told this person, 250 years ago, everyone was Orthodox. So in the last 200 years, we messed it up in a major way. Right? But we certainly have the merit of the Torah being a link in a chain. I said, everyone cut their link. I didn't cut the link. I reconnected. Right? I reconnected that link. And what's the answer? What's the answer? You're a nutcase. You're a fanatic. Okay, I'm a fanatic.
Way.
Right?
No way.
But that link goes back. It's not based on our own. Right?
Rabbi.
So therefore, I cannot say that, everything I got is based on my hard work. I've worked hard. I continue to work hard. But it's only because of that, and that desire is there, and that desire to struggle and continue, and fight my way through. That's the only way you get to anything. right? It's by the struggles that we lose. And then once you understand how I lost the struggle, you fight again. And, just like being a bad boxer, you get knocked down, but you're not out for the count, right? I've had a number of things I should have been out for the count for a lot of things, right? But in the end, I just want to show people this is not Kabbalah.
No,
this is not high in the high in the sky, pie in the
life,
sky, idea. We're talking real issues in this world. My feet very much. Come on, can you hear that? My feet on the ground. My feet are very much on the ground.
Rabbi,
there's a whole world out there. There's a whole world out there that we don't see, and we shouldn't think for one iota. Everything that I'm doing is based on me. You have to put your best foot forward, but make no mistake. This is what the mission is saying, which we didn't get to, but we are going to get to. This is just a prelude for that.
Rabbi, you really nailed it home today, and I gotta say that your real life experiences that you've mentioned, one time when you were young, thinking it may have been you lifting yourself up, turning from this, changing back, pursuing that. I'll tell you, all the hard struggles you've gone through really helped you punch it out today in a clear manner. There is such depth in today's message. The way you brought it out, and you didn't just bring out the Mishnah as it's written. You brought out some real life tangible experiences that I could say, oh my gosh, this is, like you say, grounded. This is real. This guy's gone through this. More than that, he can say it honestly from the heart. I really look forward to hearing how this continues next week. It's going to be exciting. So shall we wind it down at that, Rabbi? I got to get ready for my next class.
You can wind it down. That's good.
Rabbi, thank you so much for today's class. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And there's things I want to jump back in and I say, he just worded it from life experience. He didn't just say it from a book. There's something lived there today. And
but if you have a question, probably 5 minutes later, I'm going to answer it in a different way. So,
well, I got to wind her down. I'll be ready for the next broadcast. So I'm going to do that. But
that's what, some people say about my class. It's like, wow, I had all these questions, just answered them like one after another. So that's good. So
well, folks, you can always send Rabbi Coffman questions.
That's good.
So they can send you questions, Rabbi? Can the people listening?
100%.
So there you go, folks. Find him on social media. Find him on YouTube. You can always find him on his webpage, orthodoxconversion.com. Feel free to check him out.
Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on Facebook.
Forgive me, folks. There you go. You have it, folks. So till next week, I'm looking forward to it. Hashem willing, we'll see you all then.